guys, welcome back to Derezzed on Clownfish TV. Actually, this will probably be the first time you'll be watching Derezzed on Clownfish TV or listening to it on Spotify or wherever else you find high quality podcasts that aren't this one. My name is Tom Pratt, aka Neon. I am a co-host on Clownfish TV. That is a YouTube channel, and we basically bitch about pop culture. And today I've got some guests with me. We're going to bitch about the comic book industry or talk about the state of the comic book industry. And all of these gentlemen have worked in the comic book industry for quite some time. And hopefully we're going to get some insight into why things are the way they are. And the long and short of it is they're not good. It's really not good for most people. There are exceptions. We're going to talk about it. So we're going to go around, I guess, the virtual room here. I'm going to introduce everybody and just, give your name, tell us what you've worked on, what you've done, what you like about comics, and we'll move on, right? So first up is Art Thibert. Say hello, Art.
Hey, what's up? What's up? Thanks for having me, Neon. I'm going to call you Neon because I'm not used to using your real
that's
name.
Fine. That's fine. I'm not either.
So Art Thibert, I've been in the comics industry for around 40 plus years.
Wow.
Well, not 40 plus, 40 years. Let's round it. So worked on Adventures of Superman, DC Comics, Ultimate Spider-Man, worked on the X books for about 15 years on and off. But I think it's about 15 years total. Linked up, and so I've probably worked on just about every title there is at Marvel DC. In the 90s, I left and went over and helped form Image Comics, and that was a good run. And so now I am independently publishing with my own brands and stuff at Hack Shack Studios. So, yeah.
Fantastic. All right. Thank you for coming on the show. Next up is Aaron Sparrow. Say hello, Aaron.
Hey, it's nice to be back.
Yeah. So Mr. Sparrow and I have kind of a shared history. We both worked on Disney books for a while, right? Mm-hmm. So tell folks about that.
Okay, so I first met Neon when I was editor over the Boom Kids Disney line that they did. So they had Disney, they had Pixar, and they had Muppets. It was a really sweet trio of licenses, and they didn't know what to do with it. They just wanted to do reprints of Mickey, and they wanted to do original Pixar stuff, but they wanted it to be just as bare bones as possible. And I came in there and working together with Pixar, we wanted to make it, really special. I wanted everything to kind of like have weight and have meaning. And I wanted you to have the same experience if you picked up a Pixar comic as maybe you did with a Pixar movie. And this is when Pixar was good. So this is when Pixar was just a hit machine. Everything they did was spectacular. And I came in and I really wanted to do a Darkwing Duck book. And Neon and when I was told that as, the editor who had the story, I had the story all laid out, I had the marketing plan, I had everything ready to go. But the editor-in-chief, who was his title was managing editor at the time, did not like me. And so I was told that I couldn't write it. So Neon was one of the first guys that I wanted to tap to do that.
Thank you.
Unfortunately, Neon had pissed off the head of marketing at Boom by reporting our sales numbers on one of the Disney sites. So I wasn't.
It's what I do, man. That's what I do. I just piss people off with facts. It's
like that you weren't allowed to do that. So
people don't really like honesty.
No, and especially everything was subterfuge at Boom, and everything was angling and how do we spin this, and so Neon just being out there spitting facts didn't sit well. So we never got the opportunity to work together on any comics, but we've been in communication. Or we redo that. We've been in communication, and we've been friends ever since.
Yes, thank you very much for that. Yeah, you could have ignored me like everybody else and just been like, yeah, this guy's bad news. I can't be anywhere.
I've always had an open policy with just not only with submissions as an editor, like anybody can walk in off the street and say, hey, I'd like to pitch you something, and I'll let them do it. But also, not knowing you, but you coming around and I'm like, hey, this guy's he's posted some Darkwing art and he seems interested, and I feel like I could work with him. I
was very interested. You have no idea, but
yeah, no, you had posted a whole thing. I
shut my mouth off.
You had a whole thing online, and that's how I found a lot of guys James Silvani, who ended up drawing the book with me. And I ended up ghostwriting it, and they put somebody else's name on it,
Yeah.
and boom, of course. But later that got corrected in the Definitively Dangerous edition, which if you can find it cheap, grab it because it's almost never cheap anymore. I ended up working with James Silvani, and the way I found him was he had just posted some art in the Boom forums saying like, I really like Roger Langridge's Muppet book, and so I drew some Muppet art, and it was like, oh my god, this guy's really good. And
Yeah, God, that Muppets book was so good. It was so good.
Yeah, Roger is just like an unsung genius. I don't think he gets nearly the credit that he deserves. He's kind of like an artist's artist, where all the artists really love him and know what his value is, but it doesn't seem to resonate with the general public as much.
I always wanted to ask somebody this question. You're the guy, Aaron. Is like the guys that draw the cartoon books, do they do animation as well? Or is it like two separate? Oh, okay.
Yeah, so for example, Sabrina Alberghetti is a really talented artist. She works, she does storyboards and things like that for Disney now, and she was doing it then. But she drew like some backup stories for us and did a lot of covers. Just absolutely fantastic. So yeah, there is a lot of crossover there.
Okay, have to introduce Mr. Matt Moylan, who's waiting patiently down here in this corner down here. Matt and I have known each other for quite a while too, online, and we've had the pleasure, a couple of projects here and there we got to work on. Matt works for UDON, and why don't you tell me about it? Because that's kind of a crazy story how you got to work for UDON Publishing.
Well, I've been working in comics a little more than 20 years, starting at Dreamwave Productions, doing Transformers and Ninja Turtles and a bunch of other things, and they went under after a few years, and so for most of that time I've actually been working at UDON, maybe like 16 years or so. Doing so we do comics, we do manga, we do art books. Best known for the Street Fighter comic books. But yeah, we've like at the beginning we just did comics, and slowly have grown for like, oh, comics are a thing we do because we kind of historically have done comics now. So we always do a few. But
Awesome.
Yeah, we put most of our focus on manga and art books because just the sales are there, the amount of work we have to put into them versus the return is amazing. Versus comics are like the most work intense, most expensive thing we do for the least return. But
I have a couple of those art books. They look fantastic.
Yeah.
Awesome, thanks.
Yeah, the UDON stuff is just absolutely gorgeous. I love everything that you guys put out. It's so fantastic.
It's top notch.
So we try to do.
Yeah, it's good stuff. I've got pretty much all the, I think, Mega Man books. Freaking love Mega Man, but yeah, you guys do good work, and all of you guys, I have you here because I want to talk about kind of where comics is at, the mainstream comic book industry now. I know there's a lot of talk on YouTube about DIY, doing it yourself, crowdfunding, and we'll kind of get there. But I kind of want to get a feel for, I guess, where comics was, as a business, as a career. And, I know Art and Aaron have been doing this for a long time, and you can kind of see, I hate to say the degradation, but like you can kind of see the downward trend, or at least of, the mainstream, the Marvel, DC. And then Matt, though, his experience has been different from, as I understand it, like UDON's been doing really, really well.
Yeah, we've had different times where we've done more or less comics. Like during the first pandemic year, it was kind of a coincidence. Like we didn't plan very many comics, and we just like, let's not plan anymore. Let's just wait this out and see how it goes. So, but I mean, this year we're doing, 12 or 15 issues. We just finished a mini series with Capcom of like 4 48-page issues for Street Fighter 6, the new game. And we've got some one-shots coming out and some other comic-like things, like we do an annual swimsuit special for Street Fighter. We've got another book coming up that's going to look like a comic, but it's not actually inside. Something a little different. But yeah, for us, we've found success the last few years with like kind of a formula where we sell to the direct market, we sell on our own personal online store, and we sell a lot of retailer exclusive covers. And any one, maybe any two of those channels would still keep us going with the comics. If we lost the direct market, or if retailers just not interested in exclusive variants anymore, they'd still be okay. They'd still be profitable, but it's nice to have all three of those. But truthfully, most of our comics are profitable in the first week after we announce them, just from our web store sales. So we have a good formula of almost every issue has like a direct market A and B cover, a blank sketch cover and an incentive cover, and our incentives are only like 5-1. So we're just hoping people order like, oh, just order one extra if you're going to order 4, if you're going to order 9.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And we feel our books are usually under ordered because we overprint 15 to 20% of every comic, and that almost always sells out at Diamond. But besides those 4 direct market covers, we do 2 covers for our website. Like a $20 cover and a super rare $50 cover. And just selling the regular issue and our exclusive covers will usually pay for a comic. But it's not, like I said, it's nice to have those other channels right now. So for us, it's okay. We're the last, like the new swimsuit special I just sent to print, it has a print run of about 25,000 through all different channels. So it's not bad.
Pretty good. Yeah.
For us, yeah.
When I was ordering for shops, I still order for shops, but at the time they carried comics, and they don't anymore. They've moved away from new comics. But we ordered the UDON swimsuit special, and it outsold Batman for us that month.
Yeah,
Wow.
It was especially at the beginning. It was a big like, wow, nobody's doing this anymore. Like so cool. So, actually during the pandemic, the book that really got us through the pandemic was the swimsuit special collection, like a hardcover collection. It just worked out. That's when the first 4 issues, had been done. We were doing a collection, and that did great for us. I mean,
that's a smart idea to do it as a coffee table book, like a hardback.
Yeah.
Coffee
Yeah,
table.
we're gonna have volume 2 of like the second volume hardcover next year.
And for some reason, I'm seeing it as an oversized, like at least magazine size, right?
They're like, I grabbed right here. Oh, here's a comic, and here's our collection size, kind of.
You just made a sale, man.
Selling comics?
But-
I would have thought.
Yeah. But I mean, some publishers got close to trial. I mean, us, Udon has no debt and only one owner, so we did okay. Like we got down really close to our cash reserves during the pandemic, but we worked through it with the whole Diamond shutdown and everything.
Mm-hmm.
But it's okay. Like I said, like we have other channels, we have our personal store, things like that. So we got through it okay.
Yeah, so I guess I could talk about that somewhat. Diamond, that whole situation there, that's been kind of the, Diamond has been more or less the comic book industry. Like, when Diamond's healthy, everybody's doing fine. Diamond's not good, the entire industry suffers, shops suffer, publishers suffer. And my personal opinion is Jeppy crawled underneath the desk in the fetal position during the pandemic. And it just set off this domino effect for a lot of smaller publishers and knocked them out of business.
Yeah, but the decline was I mean, the writing was on the wall before the pandemic. I think the pandemic was just the straw that broke the camel's back. I think Diamond had been floating a lot of these retail stores for a while. It was almost like this credit and debt system. Almost every retailer I knew had some kind of debt owed to Diamond, as far as orders, things like that.
Yeah.
And it was almost like, they were like a bank, like the Bank of America versus being an actual distributor. And so I don't think the industry has been in a healthy place in a long time. And I've been doing this for a long time. And there used to be a variety of distributors. There was Diamond, there was Capital, there was Heroes World, there were multiple other like smaller distributors, and the industry was a lot healthier. And the thing is, like, if you couldn't get support from Diamond, you could go over to Capital. Because I remember when I was self-publishing in the 90s, I could go over to Capital, and they would give me covers, to promote my books. Things like that. Diamond was a little harder to deal with. I do remember at one point where Diamond was saying if the books don't sell a certain amount, they're not even going to carry them. Yeah. And then Capital kind of didn't make that distinction and kept carrying things. But I think the industry's been wounded for a while, and I think the beginning of the end for me was when they gave up the newsstands and they went to the direct market. I know Marvel and DC, the mainstream, they stopped going to the mom and pop, like liquor stores, 7-Elevens, things like that. And they started just getting, the orders directly through retailers. So I think that at that point, as far as just marketing and getting comics into new hands, kids, I think all of us have the same story. Almost everybody I've ever asked this question is like, where did you get your first comic? Some liquor store, 7-Eleven, something like that.
Yeah.
And so I think that they overlooked the importance of that. Even if they weren't making the sale, they were advertising the product. People knew the product existed. You could go into a 7-Eleven, you could look at the newsstand, and there were comics. A lot of liquor stores and not supermarkets as much as like drugstores, things like that. They had spinner racks when I was a kid. So they were always accessible. So you always knew the product was there. So I think it's been a steady kind of erosion from the time they decided to go just direct market.
Well, they weren't only accessible, they were affordable. As a kid, you could roll into Thrifties, and if you had like $2, you could get 2-3 comic books, off the spinner rack. So, and that's how like a lot of us discovered it. Like my first comic book, I'd been given a few here and there. Like my grandmother had bought me some G.I. Joe, and I'd been given a box of Archies when I went to visit my great grandmother from her neighbor, the digests. So I knew about, what comics were. But it wasn't until G.I. Joe hit really big and they were doing those TV commercials. I went and I bought my first issue of G.I. Joe, and then I was hooked. And it was such a great marketing tool for Marvel at the time, because you'd go through it and they'd have ads for X-Men and things like that. And I started to like look at Wolverine and go like, who's this guy? What's this X-Men thing? And so the next time I went to the store, to get G.I. Joe, I also grabbed a copy of X-Men. And that led me into the larger Marvel universe. And then from there, I checked out Batman, from DC. And that was, my entry point to the larger DC universe. And it became... Okay,
this is an aside. I have to say this. So how many of you guys ended up just like cleaning the spinner rack out, right? So you first, you have your money, right? So you buy all the ones you really want, right? And then you still need something to read. You still need a comic, right? So then you start looking, well... maybe Supergirl, right? And so you start going to the BEC, and then before you know it, you're buying hot stuff and little Lulu, like nutty stuff. Yeah.
Well, what would happen with me is I would work my way through like the Marvels I wanted, because back then, Marvel only put out like 20 books a month or something, 25 books, and you could buy with your lawn mowing earnings, you literally could buy like everything notable that Marvel put out in the late 80s, but then I started to get into like the darker side of the Dark Horse comics, the Now comics. That was a big one. I remember buying a Now comic, and it was real Ghostbusters. It was like $1.75 or $2. I'm like, for one comic, that's insane. That's highway robbery. But damn it, I like that Slimer cover, so I'm gonna buy that Speed Racer, Ace Reed Speed Racer. But yeah, so I'd run out of like the Marvels, and I'd be like, and I'd just start buying all these licensed books from everybody else. I started getting the the Gladstone comics, so I got into Scrooge and all that, and yeah.
Like I remember buying my first Comico book. I got into Elementals, and I was like, and I probably shouldn't have been reading Bill Willingham's Elementals at the time, because it was fairly adult, a lot more adult oriented than anything I was reading from Marvel or DC. But I was like, oh wow, this is really fascinating, and this world's really fascinating. And then I started checking out like books like The Maze Agency or Hero Alliance, all these other like offshoots, because at the time that was around the time that Ninja Turtles was hitting it really big, and I had jumped in on the first issue of Ninja Turtles, so which was at a very, very low print run. So it really like led you into a lifetime of love of the medium and being willing to check out like a million different things. And the sad truth now is that it's not even really worth looking at the stuff that's coming out of the big two. All of the interesting things are being done independently. So it's really kind of been like a revolution. Now maybe you find an independent book and that gets you into comics in general. If you like the Rippaverse, with Eric July. A lot of people there, I'm sure, have never bought a comic book before, and maybe now they'll start checking out other stuff. Like maybe they'll gravitate over to what Art's doing, and all the guys that are doing it independently. I think it's great. I think that it's obviously dark times for the mainstream industry, but I remain hopeful for, everybody who's doing it independently and is really focused on putting out quality product instead of just occupying a space every month on the rack.
Yeah, the sad thing I think is just like retailers. I love those guys. They work their ass off. They take a chance on your product, and I think they're the ones that are really being done dirty. Like the publishers, they're making a decision, right? They're saying we're going to publish this type of book. So whatever happens to them, it's a decision that they've made. But these retailers didn't make that decision. You know what I mean? So that they're kind of stuck selling these things that aren't really moving. And that's the one that my heart goes out to right now. Like, I don't really have much, like, my heart doesn't, oh, poor DC or poor Marvel or any of these companies. But I still do feel for those poor retailers. They're stuck with trying to sell, I don't know, Superman.
It's like the Bud Light situation, right? It's people at the top make some really stupid decisions. And then it's like the distributors and all the people who are down the chain who end up suffering. Yeah, that company's losing money, but from the boycott. But it's really the guys on the lower end, your retailers and things like that are suffering the blow from that. The people that are your business partners. And that's why I've never really agreed with the attitude that ended up kind of taking over comics circa 2016, which was, if you don't like my politics, or you don't like what I have to say, don't buy my book. It's like, okay, well, maybe you don't need people to buy your book, but your artist, your colorist, your inker, your letterer, all the people that depend on that check every month, you're screwing them. So it always rolls downhill to, the people that are on the lower end. And now we've hit a point where the only people you can get into the mainstream comics industry are people on the lower end who work for nothing. We just had the comics broke me hashtag that just went crazy on Twitter where everybody talked about their L's. And I didn't have anything to contribute to it because, have I had some bad experiences in comics? Absolutely. But overall, I've never dove completely into that pool. I've always had side hustles. I was always smart enough never to put all my eggs in that basket because I saw it from the very beginning.
Well, the thing is, like, if I could chime in on like comics broke me or whatever, the thing is, this is a hard industry, no doubt about it. I mean, it is tough. I mean, working, page to page, month to month, not having any. I mean, we were never employed. We never had a job per se. It was just freelance. Hey, you want to do this issue of this or this issue of that? You know what I mean? So you're always scrambling. You're always hustling. I always thought it like I grew up in a time where my dad was like, pay your dues, right? So the thing is, you're constantly paying and repaying, but we never stopped. Like in the old days, we just did it. You know what I mean? You worked, you loved the industry, and you just kept hustling. Nowadays, people are like they're the only ones. Like they're sharing their sob stories. And who you preaching to, man? You're preaching to people that have done exactly the same thing that you're going through. You know what I mean? You're not the exception. You're the freaking rule. So get over yourself. And if you love the industry, buckle down. And draw your comics and I'm sorry, shut the hell up, because because I would hear these stories. I've read these stories and I'm like, yeah, these are fairly common. Like there wasn't one that I was like, oh, well, that I've never heard that one before. They're all stories and they're all things that have happened to everyone that's ever done this. Yeah.
When I was at Boom as an editor, just to piggyback on that, I had done a lot to, at the time I was hiring people. They didn't give me a budget. So I was hiring people at, kind of a living wage that had been set by the editor before me, Paul Morrissey. And then they came back and they were like, no, you need to get these people for much less. And I said, well, they're drawing an entire book for us in a month. They can't live on that. And I was told by the owner of the company, the only people stupid enough to think that they should be able to earn a living in comics are comic book artists. That was like something that he said to me. And, in a sense, like at the time I was really offended by that. But now I kind of understand it. I kind of understand, like, I don't think it was coming from a good place from him. But on the flip side, I can kind of see it. The way that the rates are being paid right now, if you're expecting to make a living in this industry as an artist, you've got to go do your own thing because the mainstream companies aren't interested in paying you. They're interested in paying you as little as possible. And the quality of the work suffers. And then what happens? less customers. So we've got to increase our cover schemes where we've got multiple covers on a book to try and get more people to buy, to squeeze more money out of the same shrinking pool of customers. There's not anybody new coming in. There's nothing appealing being produced to grab new people. And it's just shrinking and shrinking and shrinking. And they don't seem to have any plan for it whatsoever.
Yeah. And the newsstand's gone. So you have no mainstream distribution, So yeah, how are you going to sell these things?
Well, if the high-ups keep pretending that nothing's wrong, all the people, there's nobody's striving to do better. Like they keep saying comics are doing better than ever. Like, no, well, it depends comics is not everything. What people are saying comics is superhero comics, floppy comics, American comics. Right now, almost every category of comics and graphic novel is growing except superhero comics is shrinking.
Well, that's what
I've been hearing that for like 3 years in distributor meetings and whatever.
Yeah, Matt's down there counting his money as everybody else is talking about.
Well, I don't think people are aware of like the scales of how these different segments are. So the top Marvel graphic novel last year in like the book market, according to like book scan numbers, was this Moon Knight graphic novel, and it sold about 20,000 copies last year. The latest volume of My Hero Academia, which came out, I don't know, 3 or 4 months ago, like triples that. That's like volume 34 or something, 33. And the latest volume of Dogman came out. My daughter just got it, I think, in March. That's like 750,000 in the last 3 months.
Oh my God.
750,000.
And it's probably really higher than that. That's just Bookscan. Bookscan is actual customer purchases at major retailers and stuff like Amazon and Barnes and Noble and stuff. So there's even other way, like Dogman is sold at like Costco, there's all kinds of other places that place. So it's probably like 1.5 million or something. But
Walmart, Target, and that's the thing too. So many of these books that are accessible to a general audience, people that don't normally read comics, are available in places where people go. Right now the direct market, like you have to go out of your way to go find a comic book shop. Where are you going to find a comic book shop to buy these floppy comic books that are way overpriced? But it's just
they're really good. Adults would enjoy Dogman and especially enjoy the spin-off Cat Kid Comic Club. It is so good. There's like industry commentary on it, things like that. One of the Cat Kid Comic Club is about a group of frogs who make their own comics. In all different styles, and like one of them gets a rejection letter from a publisher, and he's reading it, blah 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 blah, enforcing gender stereotypes, blah blah blah. What the heck is this? And like it's like a kid's comic talking about this, and it's hilarious.
Yeah, you've got to do stuff that's because you figure it's the adults that are going to introduce the kids to the comics, probably, especially the way the model is now. So because a kid can't just discover it at 7-Eleven or Circle K or whatever liquor store you go to. So you have to have parents introduce it to them. So, it behooves you to, and this is what we always strive for on the Disney books when I was working on them, both at, Joe Books and at Boom, was, there's got to be something there for the adults, but it's still got to be accessible and appropriate for kids. So that's what we always went for. And now, you've got the Darkwing Duck book out from Dynamite, and it's written for very, very small kids. But the cover, and for just adults that just want to have something Darkwing, but it's not really compelling in any way. It's all very simple stories. I think that they're even less sophisticated than some of the ones that ran like in Disney Adventures. But, you've got a cover program that's built for adult collectors. So there's just this weird disconnect, and no one seems to really know how to do it anymore. It's just like continual cover schemes instead of saying, hey, top to bottom, how do we make a quality product that appeals to somebody and that might have the chance to like break out and reach an audience that's outside of people going to the comic book store.
Because their concern is to sell it to the retailer and not to the customer. I think if they had to answer to the customers, like a lot of the direct market stuff that I do at least, I think it would be different. Because all those trickery covers and all those schemes and scams, those are basically designed for retailers, less than consumers. And this is the thing, since I've been in this industry, because I know some of these marketing guys at DC and Marvel, and they would always get paid, at least in the early days, way more than I did, right? And I always your job is to sell comic books, right?
Yeah. Well,
why don't you sell comic books? It's like they would put an ad together, they'd put it in Diamond or Capital or wherever, and that would kind of be the extent of it. They would take a retailer meeting, once a year or whenever. And so that was kind of the extent of what they would do to actually market and sell comics. And then I hated this because I remember I had a conversation with Dan Jurgens. We were working on a book, and it was great. It was great. But Dan got a bunch of heat, because the book wasn't selling, right? So all the fanzines, and they call them fanzines in those days, they went after him. And then I realized, it's not his fault. It's not our fault. We put out a good book. DC didn't sell the book. You know what I mean? They didn't move the product. They didn't get it in front of people. I know you only have a month, because this is monthly, and it's a little hard to sell a product that you only have a month for, but it can be done. But I noticed that most of these people that were the heads of sales departments and stuff like that at Marvel and DC, they just weren't really that good. They were mostly just kind of selling to Diamond or selling to the distributor, maybe a little bit of the retailer, but not much more than that. So I think the industry is in the place it is now is because there just wasn't enough emphasis on selling the product.
So
let me tell you something about variant covers, because we do a lot of them. I sent a book to print recently that had a cover Q on it, cover ABCQ. So there is a market for these variant covers and expensive retailer exclusives, but they're not comic readers. They're art collectors. Mm-hmm. For whatever reason, have you ever seen the Futurama episode where in the future in museums all the art is painted on fat guys? That's just what people like in the future. So whatever reason, people want their art on comic books, even if they're not going to read the comic book. So there's
I've kind of discovered that at Merck Publishing as well.
If we did exclusive prints on our website instead of exclusive covers, they would not sell as well. They would be exclusive comic covers. So, but that's just what people want right now. But it's true that there are people buying them, but it's not growing readership, and it's not
Well, it gets ridiculous. Product. What was the wedding? The DC Batman Wonder Woman. How many covers were there? 100 or some crazy amount like that. Like some of this stuff does get ridiculous. But if it's a high end collectible, like what you're saying, Matt, there is value to it. But you are creating something for a certain type of customer, so it is tailored. I think the Marvel DC stuff, it's almost more of a scam. It feels like
you still strive to tell a good story and have good interior art and put out a quality product, even wrapped in those covers, though, Matt. That's the difference. And that's, what we do at Merck is that as editor in chief over kind of the Merck Publishing line, that's what I do is I'm writing 2 of the books generally, and then I'm also helping to oversee the overall universe because it is interconnected, and I want the stories to matter so that for the people that do actually crack them open and read them, there's something there for them as well. Whereas I think with the mainstream, we're moving further and further away from that. We're hiring people that don't have the talent, that haven't been, or maybe have some germ of talent, but it hasn't been fostered. And you don't have editors that are working with them to teach them to tell better stories and to think of the way that that these stories actually matter. It doesn't matter. It's just whatever your first draft is, that goes to print, because it doesn't matter because we've got 20 covers that are going to sell the book until it doesn't, and we reboot it anyway. Yeah,
we aim to work with people who care about the properties that we're working with and who are big fans of them, and who want to, our goal is to shepherd properties, not sometimes put a few of our own spins in there, but we don't want to reinvent anything. We want to take care of these properties. With Street Fighter, we did take care of it for many years. There was no Street Fighter game for 9 years between 3 and 4. Mm-hmm. And one of the reasons we got the license was that Capcom said, "Oh yeah, we're done with that. We're never touching that again. Go ahead, take it." But you got to have people who care about the books that you're working on, or if you're just trying to reinvent it, or you're trying to, or you just I think this can be my avenue to put my message in it. You're just gonna lose the existing audience, and the new audience isn't gonna come. They're not gonna show up.
Do you think that maybe companies now aren't incentivized there because there is a safety net? In the case of Marvel and DC, they're owned by mega corporations. They really don't have to probably perform as well as UDON, where you're selling direct to consumer. You're selling to the consumer, you're appealing to the consumer in addition to comics shops, but you're selling directly to. Marvel and DC, I mean, you've got people that are just kind of putting their time in. You know, do they need to have that safety net taken away from them to really perform? Like, does a comic book publisher have to be a comic book publisher in the business of selling as many comics as possible to light a fire under the asses of some of these people that have been sitting on their asses?
No, I mean, Marvel is totally a post-profit company. They're an idea factory. You know, they're just
with no ideas.
You know, they're not all. No, but that's it. They're like, do something different. Anything that's not what we already did. And maybe something will be a movie in 10 years. So
you get $5,000 for that, right?
Yeah, just like a concept. They're just like a concept studio.
Well, and to be honest, that's how DC was. I remember when I first got hired there, it was like DC never showed a profit. They always had, like, Warner Brothers always had a parent company, and so it was more like it was a licensing. So comics has always been used since I've been doing, working in the industry. It's been like that. So, DC would always, to Warner Brothers, they were more of like licensing. They made more money off Underoos and toys and things like that than they did, in the comics. And then, of course, Tim Burton, or it was like, the Superman movies with Chris Reeves, and then, the Tim Burton Batman movies and stuff like that. And so then, the market started opening up with film, and then, of course, Marvel with Spider-Man and then the Marvel Universe. But yeah, it really is it just is an IP farm. And it's probably a hell of a tax deduction for the parent company.
Well, I think I've seen Ethan Van Sciver talk about the fact that DC, obviously and I've seen Jim Starlin and other creators talk about the fact that they'll get a much larger check from Warner Brothers for something that gets used in a film than they will from Disney, Marvel. Maybe they get $5,000 and maybe they get thanked in the credits, maybe you get a free ticket if you're in the town that the movie is showing in, to go see it. But DC royalties have traditionally been better, but it's on characters and concepts. And Ethan had created a bunch of different logos for the emotional spectrum of, the DC
Green
universe.
Lanterns.
Yeah, when he was on the Green Lantern book, and he said, "Well, what's my percentage of that?" And they refused to give any percentage of that because they make so much more off of the T-shirts, those logos, those things that are sold in Target and Walmart. There's so much more money there that doesn't get shared with the creators. And the problem for Marvel and DC now is, now that everybody knows that you're going to go make movies and that you're going to make merchandise and you're going to bring in all this money to you, what is my incentive as a creator to create anything for you? To get that $5,000 check? How much more could I get if I took my concept and my great original idea and went and crowdfunded it myself and put it out? The return for me is going to be much better, much bigger. And why wouldn't you do that? And that's made the comics industry suffer even more, because now all you get from Marvel or DC are the writers that go in, they're just doing regurgitations of things that already exist. How many more variations of Gwen Stacy are we going to get? Gwenpool, those are all derivative. And that's the only thing that's worth creating at Marvel, because you're not going to see any money on it anyway.
Yeah. There's no incentive to create something brand new. I thought if like Marvel or DC wanted to really change things, I would have an initiative where I incentivize creativity. So I would say, we'll do some kind of ownership program. You'll get paid, and we want an emphasis. And I would make the emphasis on villains. I would say we need some contemporary villains, because I always hear the answers like, oh, we got to make Superman more contemporary. No, don't change Superman. Just make the world and the villains he's fighting more contemporary. The answer is never to change the core character. The answer is just to make the world different. And so I would incentivize like creatives. And it wouldn't matter if you're a writer, penciler, inker, letterer, colorist. Like good ideas could come from anywhere. And I would make it just company wide and incentivize some kind of program to create villains. And then you can pitch it to your editor. And if it gets okay, then you're part of the program. Because I do think, like you're saying, Aaron, there just isn't anything new. It's just kind of regurgitating the old, because, why would you take, like your idea, your blood, sweat, your tears into something and go, hey, DC, hey, Marvel, publish this, knowing that you're never really going to see too much of a dime on the back end,
Yeah.
you know, and they're going to get millions if it takes off, you know.
Yeah, save your best ideas for yourself, because the company has no interest in taking care of you. Why would you take care of them in that way?
Right. Well, Lin Wein told me this once. He said Lucius Fox, the character, just a side character in Batman, he made more in royalties off that one character than he did all those X-Men characters that he created for Marvel. He said basically everything he created at Marvel, just one character, Lucius Fox. And that's also the difference between companies, because DC will take care of you as far as, own, not so much ownership, but as far as, royalties on what you've created. Marvel, nah. I mean, I created all like the backstory with Fabian Nicieza for Cable. So all of Cable's, family, his home world, his timeline, all that stuff. So if they use it in a movie, I'm sure I'll get something, but not a whole hell of a lot.
$5,000. You'll get
$5,000.
But
I've been hearing that number for so many years, maybe like 15 years, like $5,000 of shut up money.
Yeah, it's just a good round amount of money.
Yeah.
But like DC, oh my gosh, what was it called? Something of Tomorrow. I never watched the show.
Legends of Tomorrow.
Legends of Tomorrow. Well, they used like Time Masters, and they used some of the stuff that I did, early on in my career. And so, yeah, DC gave me a pretty good royalty check, for what I contributed at the time. And so DC actually takes better care of, people that do create characters for them. Not much better, but they do take better care.
That was before David Zaslav. So, I'm just saying, could that deal change going forward? Because he is notoriously cheap. Like he's trying to do everything on the cheap. And look, there are some decisions he's made I agree with. I think if something's not performing, you cut it loose. But I can't see him being overly generous with compensation to comic book creators. If he's canceling the Batgirl movie that's 95% complete to save money. He's not going to give you a bunch of money for.
Let me tell you a story about the mentality that kind of goes behind this with these big corporations, because I saw it firsthand. I worked with somebody at Disney Publishing, and they had presented the idea. It was a time, obviously worked on Duck books, and Carl Barks, big famous, Duck artist, the one that kind of like got us all into Scrooge, and then later Don Rosa. Don Rosa was having some health problems, and Don Rosa's relationship with Disney is very contentious. For those of you who don't know, very, very contentious. I'm not going to go into it here. Feel free to look it up. But he was having some health problems, and one of the people that I dealt with in Disney Publishing put together just kind of like a pitch to said like, hey, look, our relationship with Don has been really contentious for a long time. It's a drop in the bucket for us. What if we paid for his medical, we just kind of like took care of him and helped him out and paid for his medical procedures and kind of helped get him through this. Not only would that, maybe start the beginning of repairing our relationship with him, but it's also just a goodwill gesture of something to do for somebody who's given us so much, who we have made so much money off of. And he was told that legal wouldn't even consider it, because if you do it for one person, then everybody else is going to expect you to do it for them, and they will not, they do not even want to have that possibility as a suggestion. So, the thing that you learn really quick in working with these big corporations, it's easier for legal and the people that are in approvals to say no than it is to find out if it's feasible to do it.
Yeah.
So that kind of takes me into, we were talking about comics broke me. And one thing that a lot of creators have been pushing for a long time is some kind of a comic book union. And again, how sustainable is that given the numbers? Yeah, you're just like laughing at me. How sustainable is it when your comics are selling under 3,000 copies?
It's a nice
for
idea.
Everybody to have it. I mean, I guess my thing is like I could see like a guild, like you pay your dues and you buy into this, and maybe you get reduced health insurance or something. And Matt's down there like, I'm in Canada. This doesn't even I don't care.
I'm going to the doctor right after this. I don't even.
Yeah, right. But I mean, I get in practice, you want to know if you're a freelancer, you want to be taken care of. It is tough. Everybody knows this going into it. And this is the thing people think, I'm a hard ass because we're saying, about the union situation, like it's not feasible when the money is not there, or it's feasible for fewer people. When you've got, a couple thousand people that want to be a full-time comic book freelancer, and the 95% of the books are not selling anywhere near what they need to be selling to give everybody a living wage and health insurance, what are you going to do?
It's not feasible when you have no bargaining power either. That, like, it's sad to say that, but most people in comics are replaceable, because there's I've heard this saying for a long time, that there are more people who want to work in comics than there are reading comics. Like you can and especially now that it's the internet and worldwide, you can find somebody in Singapore or Korea or wherever, or India, who's probably about as good as someone in North America, and they're willing to work for cheaper, like the same or cheaper or whatever. But
colorists for a while, they were getting replaced with Indian coloring houses, and they were doing it for a fraction. I mean, I know the going rate for colors, I don't know, when I was doing it, it depended on what books you're working on, but I mean, $100, $125 if it was like a Marvel DC thing. Obviously a lot less stuff I worked on because it was licensed, but
$30 a page when I was at Boom from some of the colorists in India.
Wow.
Fortunately, on my
you can't
books,
compete.
on my
You
books,
can't compete.
on my books, we were fortunate enough to have like Andrew Dalhouse, and pay him well. But there were some books that I was on that used Digicore, and it was $30 a page.
I was
I got $40 a page to do flats for this comic series. Like helping the basically colorist assistant. $40 a page 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Well, to key on Neon's point, you're not going to be able to unionize. I mean, we already established why you can't unionize, because it's not a localized place. You know what I mean? Like, everybody doesn't work under one house. People work all around the world, stuff like that. There's no way you could organize this, and there's no way you could unionize. I mean, at one point, maybe, I don't know, 30 years ago, 30 years ago, you could have done that, but you can't. There's no way you can do that now. So it's a really ridiculous idea, just based on how would you even go about doing it. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, it's multiple countries you're dealing with. There's the internet, you're just not going to be able to do it. And also the benefits, if you are a publisher, is it's a world market now. So like we were saying, you could go to India, you can go to these other places, and you can get people at a more decent or reasonable, page rate. And to them, since, they live in these other countries, they're making good money. So it's kind of a win-win. It's a win-win for the talent and for the publisher.
And by the way, to everybody in the comic book industry who's, a globalist, socialist, this is what you get. This is why you're eating cat food, is because it's a global economy, and you can be replaced much cheaper by somebody else who lives in a country where the cost of living and their, the exchange rate is much more favorable to them. That's why you are making so little as an American.
You also have these people not spending all their time on Twitter. If they're in another country, that's a huge factor. I mean, you make yourself very, very easy to get rid of. If you're complaining about everything, you're complaining about people, you're causing headaches. It's like, what? Yeah, we can just cut you loose. We can outsource your job to India. We can outsource your job to Singapore. These people draw better than you. They draw faster than you. They work for half the price, and they're not on Twitter all damn day. It's a win all the way around.
They're not mentally ill.
Yep.
It'd be very easy for many companies to also just, we can't do comics without you. Okay, we'll just not do comics. That's okay.
That is what I'm thinking potentially could happen. I mean, I think at some point in time, it is not going to make sense for Disney or Warner Brothers to publish comics themselves. I can totally see them just licensing all of it out. Disney, I mean, Aaron knows Disney's been doing it for decades. It doesn't, I mean, Marvel Comics is the outlier because everything else they do, every other brand that they own, every other IP, it's all licensed out. They have multiple, houses around the world that you just add to like the Disney pool, right? And I could totally see them just doing that with Marvel too. Just being like, we've got our style guide for Marvel. Here's basic. But what they do at that point is they'd be like, all of our Marvel comics are based on the movie versions of the Marvel characters because that's what everybody knows. So here's a style guide and all those old comics. Yeah, we're not going to do that. This is MCU versions of the characters.
And they've tried to do that. Like the first time was at Heroes Reborn or whatever, when they gave the IPs to Image Comics, and then they did Marvel Knights, with Quesada and Palmiotti. And so recently, what was it? Was it Boom? Who was it that they tried?
IDW had
IDW.
license.
Okay.
Kids comics.
So I had Little Bird tell me that was actually going to happen. And that was actually when I worked on, we had another Disney blog that we did, and this person came to me, and this person actually worked, and Aaron, I'm not going to say who it was, but this person worked at Disney Worldwide Publishing. And was like, yeah, right. And was kind of like, so here's the deal. I'm hearing rumors that they're going to start testing to see if they could just outsource all the comics, because it doesn't make sense to do everything in-house anymore. And Disney's like, they're trying to save money. Every other Disney property, they just outsource it. And frankly, this was 2016, 2017, when, they were getting all kinds of negative headlines. Marvel's getting all kinds of negative headlines for how terrible the comic line was doing. That was like, I guess, peak insanity. Axel Wanza was out the door, and they were just like, yeah, Disney's just freaking tired of dealing with it. And they're going to start. And then like within a year, here comes IDW with their Spider-Man book and their Captain Marvel book. And, I don't know for sure if it's exactly what he was talking about, but it seemed like that was, they were initiating that plan. And if it had gone differently, if IDW had not basically fucked it all up and the sales had been better, there's a pretty good chance they might have just said, here, just take the Marvel superheroes.
I don't know if we had the same source on that, but I was hearing that around the same time too, that was ultimately the plan, is that Disney was looking at just licensing it out like they do everything else. And, it's a great model for them because you pay them for the privilege to use the license. Then you pay them a royalty on whatever you sell. And then at the end of the contract, they own all of it. So everything that you produce, they own it in perpetuity. They can reprint it through whatever new partner they want. They can draw from it for movies or TV or whatever it is that they want to do. Now, unfortunately, there's a lot of really great content out there that they would be doing a lot better, if they drew from the comics, but they don't. But yeah, it's a win-win for them. So why would they have all this overhead? The thing about Disney, at least in the past, and right now they're kind of in a weird, it seems like they're in a weird agenda over profit kind of situation. But for the longest time, Disney would cut divisions that were profitable because they weren't profitable enough. The money that they were putting in, they were like, well, we could take that money and we could put it over here and we could get an even greater return. So it doesn't matter that you're making money. You're not making us enough. And that's always been the model. Mm-hmm.
Disney Infinity was a prime example of that. The video game, they were actually the top toys to life brand in video games, and they're like, yeah, we're making money, but it's not enough money. And down the road, people aren't going to want to keep buying these action figures, and it's just not worth it. So we'll just outsource all of our games to EA or whatever, and that's what they did.
Disney Adventure is another example. Yeah. That was always profitable, but it was like,
I remember working at Marvel where they had a mandate. They said if any book sells under 30,000, it will be canceled automatically. 30,000 now. Oh my God, that's crazy. They would want those back. But I want to ask Aaron, do you remember, it was probably the 90s or around there, where Disney tried to do their own superhero line, or at least had ambitions to do that. And I remember Lin Wein and Marv Wolfman, I specifically, Lin had an office on the DC or the Disney animation lot in Burbank. Mm-hmm. And, so those guys are kind of, their job is to recruit people. And so Marv called me in, and he's pitching this whole superhero line and everything. And I'm like, yeah, sounds good. Yeah, page rates. He's like, yeah, top page rates, all this stuff. And it's like, great. And then, a few months later, I'm talking to Marv. It's like, so what happened to that superhero line?
Yeah.
Yeah. So do you know anything more about it? Because I never really got any insight on it.
I don't have any insight on it. It was before kind of like my time in the industry. I was just a punk kid collecting at that point. But I do remember hearing rumblings about that, like, oh, Disney's going to have its own superhero line.
Yeah, they did. They did something like I'm remembering now. Like I know that they hired Travis Charest, and what they did is they actually kind of did superhero versions of the Disney characters.
Mm-hmm.
So there was like, there was Peter Pan, but he was a superhero, and then Captain Hook was a villain and stuff like that. And I do remember seeing some of the design work by Travis. Yeah.
Well, it works in Italy because they've done some things like that, like Paparinic, which is Donald Duck. The Duck Avenger. His superhero persona in Italy is really popular there, and they did the Wizards of Mickey that Boom ended up bringing over and just absolutely butchering. And that was one of the things that got Neon in trouble, was reporting on the numbers for that. But the funny thing is,
sucked. It sucked. The translation was terrible. It was like Google Translate or some shit.
I had scripts, Neon. I had scripts that were pitched to me that were good, but Ross didn't like the joke. Like there was just a joke on the first page where it was Scrooge saying that the stock was dropping and the investors were going to have him in the stocks if he didn't bring the price up. Ross didn't like that one joke. He was like, kids aren't going to know what stocks are. And then he was like, hire my wife. She's really good at dialogue. So I had to have his wife on the book, and it's a gig's a gig. Some people take them. I try not to take anything that I'm not passionate about. But a lot of people, hey, a gig's a gig, and didn't really know the property and things like that. And so it was what it was, and it beautiful art, but the translations never took off because they weren't being done by people who had a love of the property.
So wait, they said they got hung up over the word stocks, like
it was just one joke. One joke was what killed. See,
that's the problem. I remember as a kid, there would be words that you couldn't even pronounce. You couldn't even begin to pronounce, right? And so you run over to the dictionary and you flip through it, and then you see what the definition and how to say the word. Like all of this stuff. Like they didn't write down to children. You know what I mean? If anything, they were kind of like using terms and things like that a kid didn't know. But if you were engaged in the story, you wanted to know what that word meant, or even how to say it. And now, you hear some guy saying, oh no, we can't use stocks. What?
On Rosa, man.
And
in between the legs.
A person who didn't have kids. So, how would you know what kids are able to, kind of grasp anyway? I remember blowing my teacher's mind when I was in elementary school because I correctly used the word pusillanimous, and that was because of Cobra Commander, because I didn't know what the word meant when he said it, so I went and I looked it up.
See, yeah, all of our vocabulary, our reading comprehension, everything, yeah, comic books. But I don't think like when they made comics of old that they thought like that. They were just like, well, let's put this stuff out there. Let's not write down or play down to the kids. And also, just as far as marketability, kids don't want to read a book that's written for them and their age. They always want to read something a little bit more like out of reach or a little bit taboo, So I think Marvel always had that, like really, like early in the 60s and stuff. They had that great balance, right? Like it didn't feel insulting for a kid, and an older person could read those books and still enjoy them. And then just as another observation is then, like when I was working at DC and they had the New 52 and they go, well, the kid market's dead. We're just going, these are all going to be adult reader books. They made that decision. And I was like, why would you do that? So then it's like, blood, gore, harsher language and stuff like that. And I was like, this isn't more adult. This is just more gratuitous. You know what I mean? Like those comics of like old, some of those subject matter and some of that stuff was pretty adult. It just wasn't gratuitous.
Yeah, it's. I remember the New 52. I remember specifically the joke where Harley Quinn referred to her vagina as a clown car, and I remember I was like, I'm out. What's interesting though about your
Hong Kong.
Yeah, what's interesting, because you can fit so many clowns inside it. to your point about kids not wanting to feel like they're being talked down to or feel like that they're getting kiddie material, the reason that Boom Kids later changed to Kaboom was because the feedback Boom was getting that kids didn't want to buy a book that had kids in the title of the imprint. They wanted something that was more, and that's why it eventually changed to Kaboom.
These people need to talk to us.
Everybody fails upward.
It's always been like that. Kids don't want to also read about kids. Like young kids want to read about tweens, and tweens want to read about teenagers, and teenagers want to read about adults. That's why I hate that trope of in like 80s cartoons when they have the little kid sidekick, like Zach from Ninja Turtles. Nobody wants to hang out with the Ninja Turtles. You want to be the Ninja Turtles, right? So,
I did, Matt. That's a great observation. And I'm glad you brought it up because I've been watching old documentaries on what was it called, the Thunderbirds, Super Marionation and all that stuff, and just cool stuff. And the creators were like, we never wanted to talk down to kids, and we never, we were told like make kid characters so the kids could have some kind of representation, and they said kids don't want that. Kids want to see like teenagers or adults doing these things. And so I remember when I was pitching, this was probably 20 years ago now in Hollywood, like IPs and stuff. And that's when this transition started where it's like they wanted to like have identification, right? Like kids seeing themselves in the cartoons. So then the trend went, instead of like Scooby-Doo, which would be like teenagers or whatever, they started going, well, we want kids, this is kids going on adventures and stuff like that. And that's what they want. So it became more kid centric, but I was never completely convinced that was marketable, that's what people wanted. Because as a kid, I never had that problem.
No, and that's why they're not going to be. That's why they had to put the new April O'Neil from the Mutant Mayhem figure. They had to put her in a 5-pack because they knew if they put her out as a single character, she's never going to sell. Because there's no kid that's like, oh, hey, I want to be fat. It's like you have to get it in there for representation. You have to get in there because everything has to reflect, as the Critical Drinker says, the world of today. And that's why these things are failing. We don't go to escapism to experience the world of today or see ourselves represented on the screen. The only people that want that are people that don't have any money and don't support these things with their dollars anyway. What we want is escapism. As kids, when I saw He-Man, he didn't make me feel bad about the fact that I wasn't jacked. He made me want to be jacked. It was aspirational. With Superman, the Man of Steel movie, I remember people saying like, the reason that Superman is kind of a jerk, and the reason that he's this way is because they needed to make him more like us so he's relatable. I'm not interested in that. I'm not interested in him being more like us. I'm interested in us aspiring to be more like Superman. That's why these things are myths. That's why our mythology and our kind of like the cultural zeitgeist is always about these larger than life figures, because I don't want to see Faith from Valiant on the big screen. I'm not interested in a fat, sloppy superhero. I'm interested in characters that like make you feel better about the fact that, you just won't get up and go to the gym, or, hey, look, I know, hey, I got a dad bod. I understand. But you know what? I make the joke that when I saw Fat Thor on the screen, and I was like, oh, he's fat and depressed, finally, a superhero that represents me. I made that joke, but that's not the Thor I want. I want the Thor that appears on the battlefield going, bring me Thanos, and flies up into the air and there's lightning crackling around him. That's the power fantasy, and that's aspirational. And as they've continued, and I'm gonna get into conspiracy theory here, but as they continue to want to break us down as a society, I think that's why they continue to attack our aspirational myths. They want to wear us down to where we're all complacent in where we are, and you don't have anything to aspire to. You don't have anything to work to anymore. It's okay that you're fat and you're depressed, because so is Thor. It's okay that you're this, because so is this character. Don't you feel represented now? No, what you should strive for is you should always be striving to better yourself physically, better yourself morally, better yourself in your relationships with the people around you. And that's kind of what we're losing in this kind of modern cultural zeitgeist.
I think the morality thing was key. Like the G versus E, themes are going away. But go ahead. I'm sorry, Neon.
Oh no, it's okay. I was gonna ask Matt, because we actually could segue into manga, which is one of the few bright spots in the comic book industry right now. And one of the common threads in manga, at least, shonen manga, the really popular stuff, My Hero Academia and Demon Slayer, is we have, teen and early 20-something characters that are aspirational, that have to work, to achieve a goal, and they're characters to look up to. I know Demon Slayer was I guess one of the most popular role models for Japanese boys. They did some survey in Japan, and they said that the characters from Demon Slayer were aspirational heroes for them, because and you look at that versus what Marvel and DC are doing, and the first arc is basically training to better yourself, to overcome obstacles, to always get better. And that's a recurring theme, especially in shonen manga. It's always better yourself, power up, next level, got to get better, got to get stronger, got to be a better person, got to be a better hero, have to be a hero. And you don't see that in Western comics as much, I don't think.
That's a whole Japanese theme too. You just described the themes of Mega Man, the themes of Street Fighter. Japanese properties are often about getting stronger, and not just getting stronger person, but getting stronger and being such a good person to let your enemies join you and they get stronger, fight the next enemy. But I mean, it's certainly an aspect to it, why manga is doing so well. I mean, there's several reasons. I mean, it's so easy to read it. Oh, I want to read My Hero Academia. Here's volume 1. Start it. Like, what would you do if I want to start reading about Miles Morales, Spider-Man? I love the movie. Like, he's probably got a new #1 coming out now. Or you could read, I guess, his Ultimate Stories, or you could read his last series that was popular or something.
Yeah, so you go in as a parent, you're like, hey, I want to get this for my kid. And it's like, where do I start?
Yeah, where's Miles #1? There's no Miles #1. Yeah.
Analogous, especially to that, like if you go and watch I love the One Punch Man anime. It's so great. The manga is pretty much like that. The story is the same. You're going to see the same characters, maybe not in the same order. Maybe the adventures won't be the same. But it's the reason why, even though the Marvel Universe was like the biggest movie franchise of all time, it really didn't help the comics, because there was nowhere to lead people directly to. The American comics that like media has helped are things like The Boys and Invincible and Walking Dead, where there's a clear like one-to-one relationship. Start at the beginning of the series, and different stuff's gonna happen, but you're gonna get a lot of the same thing, a lot of the same feeling. But yeah, manga and anime being so intertwined is another one of the big reasons. It's also just I don't know, you get a lot of value for your buck with manga. I mean, most manga is between 160 to 200 pages per volume.
Mm-hmm.
10, 12, maybe even $15 at the most. And that's like the first, for at least for Americans' perception, like there's most people aren't reading the comparison of floppy comics, like, which would be like the big phone books, or like the shonen magazine. So the books are like the first place you go to. So you feel like, oh, I'm in on the ground floor reading this book.
Hey Matt, do you think some of it is also that it's usually one vision? Like a lot of the stuff that I liked in the day was like it was one artist or a small team of people. So it was kind of a personal vision versus like a corporate vision, like Marvel or DC, where it's not somebody's personal like Spider-Man adventure, like early Ditko Lee felt that way. I think that's why people like the early Marvel 60s stuff, because it felt like it was more of a personal vision. So do you think that kind of lends a hand in manga?
Oh yeah, because most mangas, of course, are usually one, maybe sometimes two creators. Right. And it's very rare that someone else will be brought in ever on a manga. They're like My Hero Academia has a spin-off, but that's like a massively popular thing. Dragon Ball has had a few creators just because Akira Toriyama is maybe too old to do a monthly manga and he wants to keep going.
This was my jam in the day. Yeah, that
was my first VHS anime I bought. It was $45 at Suncoast Video. Yeah.
See, look at all this. This is all my, so I can check out the reference. Yeah.
Well, check out his recent stuff. He's gone in a fun direction with his work. But it's also that, I mean, the publishers really respect the creators in Japan. mean, the relationship is basically like you're the creator and we're the publisher. We can never do this without each other. Like we'll never publish this, and you'll never take it somewhere else, and we'll never publish it without you, sort of a thing. So people are really like, I mean, there's of course always the stories of like the grind of manga creators, but that's like, you know, you gotta work to get to a higher place eventually. It's like that everywhere.
But the artists aren't like, I can't wait to get in so I can draw one of these characters. The artists are like, this is an IP that I'm bringing to a publisher. So it's a lot different dynamic than here in the States, because a lot of, especially mainstreamers, they're like, I want to draw Batman. But there it's kind of like, well, here's an IP, here's a universe. Would you like to publish it? And then so it becomes more like Image, where you have like personal or like voices, like individual voices that are publishing under one, Aegeus or whatever. And so I think the dynamic is different. So you're always going to it's always going to seem very different and unique, because there's many, many voices and there's many different takes on, storytelling.
Yeah, if you want to learn about how that works in Japan, read Bakuman, the manga. So it's shonen manga about making shonen manga.
I'm just going to throw this out there. If the comic industry, the mainstream American comic book industry, wanted to improve its situation, I think one way that would be really simple was, instead of, because of course for the direct market model, they have to keep canceling series because the numbers drop. They got to relaunch with the new number one to sucker, put a bunch of covers on it and sucker the retailers back in. It's just this never ending cycle. If they really wanted to improve things, it seems to me like a really simple step would be, hey, that Spider-Verse movie's making a lot of money. What if we put out a book that was just called Miles Morales Spider-Man? And it was a collection of previously published volumes, starting at the beginning when he was introduced at the end of Ultimate Spider-Man. And that first volume covers that. And then the second volume picks up where that left off. And that's number 2. It's a trade. And we have them clearly marked like manga is on the side. And we take all this history, from series to series to series, but we just package it all under this one title with one volume number across. It seems to me like that's just a really easy idea that could be implemented. And if, they wanted to put it in manga size, they could figure out how to do that, but it would be in full color, and maybe it'd be a little more expensive because of that, but you could just grab it and have that. How hard is that to do? And it seems to me that would be a really great entry point when you got kids coming off of the movies that are excited about it, because let me tell you something, as an action figure retailer, there is nothing but people buying Spider-Man right now. Kids just coming in. Do you have Miles? Do you have Peter? People are asking, do you have the Spot? Do you have Spider-Punk? They want all those characters that they just saw on the screen, and they're all selling like crazy. You could get people into the comics by having something ready to go. But the comic industry doesn't do that, because it's just like, let's just keep doing the same thing that we've been doing for diminishing returns, because it's just the same old people in charge who don't have any new ideas.
Yeah, and also Marvel, like this is already paid for, this work's already paid for, and it's one collected. So you could probably get into a retail outlet like Target or what the Walmart or whatever, because it's going to make them more money and take up less shelf space. You know what I mean? You have one volume that might be $12, $15, $20, whatever it is, versus one floppy that's $4. It takes up the same amount of space. I know DC tried to do some collected, but I think what you're saying is it's way more thought out. So it's like, whatever is really hot, they can move on it and then put it in a very digestible way for the consumer, the new consumer, to come in and pick it up and understand that universe. I think that's brilliant.
Well, the first Batman comic I ever bought was, I think it was Legend of the Batman. It was a trade paperback. It was black and white, and it collected, I think it was a 4-issue miniseries, Batman series, and it was just a little black and white. I remember it was like a little, pocket-sized book, and it was like $5 at a drugstore or something. I picked it up and I read it in the car. We were on vacation, and it was a kind of, it was cool because it was a nice little book, and it had Batman, Robin in it, and it was black and white, but I didn't really care, and I didn't realize until years later it was actually a mini series that they had packaged this way. And this would have been back in like the mid 80s,
Yeah.
And it was a nice little, package. And then I went out and I bought, the full-size Batman comics after that. So, I mean, it could work. I don't know.
When I was working on the Ultimate books, like Ultimate Spider-Man, Ultimate X-Men, Marvel did try some format stuff where they made it magazine size. And then they brought it into supermarkets, stuff like that, because most supermarkets have a magazine aisle or a partial aisle. So the Ultimate books were sold there, and they did pretty well for a while. So I don't know. I don't want to give Marvel too much credit, but
but magazines are dead. So go to the smaller format, smaller digest format.
Digest, yeah, definitely.
All right, so this is gonna segue into wrapping it up. We've been running over an hour, guys, and I really appreciate that. I mean, this is a conversation we could have, 6 to 8 hours easy, and some people do, but unfortunately, I don't have that kind of time tonight. So, I guess my thought for you gentlemen will go around the circle here. Where do you see the comic book industry in 5 years, and is there any way to repair the damage being done, or at least stop the bleeding? And I'll start with Art, since you're up top here, Art.
Yeah, I wish I could. I'm an older guy, 40 years in the business. My answer is going to sound very callous. Like me personally, right now, I don't care. like to be brutally honest, right? Like there's an indie market right now. There's a crowdfund direct market. That's working now. I think Comicsgate, we're about 4 or 5 years into this. A ton of success with creating our own IPs, things like that. So for me, that's where I'm at. Like for me personally, I can see me doing this for as long as it'll have me. And I'm thinking that, like most trends, they usually last about 10 years in the industry. So I think we got about 5 more years. There's still growth involved with what we're doing. And so that's where my heart's at. That's where I want to be personally, as far as creating comics. As far as Marvel and DC, I think they're just making decisions that they don't benefit anybody. Nobody wants these. They don't understand. Well, I think they do understand. They just don't care about who's buying these books. It really feels to me, I'm completely outside of it now. It feels like a big old middle finger to the people that support what you do, the people that are Spider-Man fans, that are Batman fans. So as far as Marvel, DC, I think if they're going to continue where they're going, I don't see anything good happening at all. So that's kind of my take. I wish I could be more positive, but yeah.
All right, let's go to Matt. Matt, you still work in the comic book industry, the mainstream comic book industry. Where do you see things going in the next couple of years?
I don't know. I can tell you what I'd like to see it in 5 years is like the big guys, Marvel and DC, like with their core universes, do less comics, do focus on doing better comics. And if you're doing less comics, maybe you can pay people more. But if you really gotta we got to keep this machine going, like we have to make this many comics, do something different that's not Marvel and DC comics. Do young adult comics that are an original universe or something. A lot of these things like the Marvel characters that people hate, people don't like a certain group, classic fans hate, like Miss Marvel and I don't know, the weird, girl Wolverine and stuff. Make them YA graphic novels instead of floppy comics. Give them their whole own universe. Put Miles Morales in there. But the younger audience wants a different product.
Well, can I add this? I'm sorry. Like for me, I think also like what we're doing now, and I know Neon did this, where you use your platform for like sales, for marketing, things like that. And so I think what these companies have to do is they have to start selling this stuff, because I always hear, and nothing against what you said, Matt, but I always hear like, well, let's change the product. Let's do this with the character. Let's do that. And then for some reason, they think the sales will go up. The sales are never going to go up. They're always going to go up like slightly. What we really need to do is we need to sell these books. books. We need to they need to put emphasis on sales, get your books into places where people can see them, and market and sell the hell out of this stuff. The thing is, I don't even think kids right now know comics exist. Like, you know what I mean? Like how do they know? Like when we were younger, like when I was a kid, everybody had comics. Like even people that weren't into comics, if you went into their bedroom, there was a small stack of comics. You know what I mean? Like it was just a commonplace. But now it just really isn't. So I would say put the emphasis on sales. But that's my 2 cents.
Aaron, got any ideas?
I mean, I think that anybody who wants to survive will probably shift to a model that's more like UDON's, which is more direct to consumer than it is the direct market. Unfortunately, as much as I would like to say that it will be otherwise, because I do love this, comic book medium so much. I think it's the best storytelling medium on the face of the earth. I don't see the mainstream correcting unless you purge those companies of, DC and Marvel, of the people that are there and just hire a whole new bunch of people who are smart and hungry and have new ideas. I don't think you're going to see any shift. There's no incentive for them to do so. Everybody there is just there to hang on to their job for as long as they can. And, let it shrink, let it shrink, let it shrink. You see it all the time from, the way that they treat customers online, the way that the people that work for these companies talk about, the people that they're trying to sell a product to. They don't have any idea how to do it. They don't care about it. They don't even like you. So, I think that we're going to see the industry continue to shrink until we get to the point where Marvel and DC characters are just marketed out to or licensed out to somebody else. And I think those companies will cease to exist as individual entities, and it'll just be more licensing under a big corporate umbrella. The good news is that I think that the hunger for good stories and for good comics will always be there, and it'll just be better and better for guys like Art, people like Comicscape, the Rippaverse, you with Crimson Ren, me working on my upcoming book, Kneel Before Doomface. I think it'll just get better and better for us, and I think it's going to be a more direct relationship with the fans. It's going to be direct to consumer. That's the way your successful comic books are going to go, because honestly, anytime any smaller company that is creative gets absorbed by a big faceless corporation, that is the beginning of the slow death. And we've been watching it happen to Marvel and DC, and you've seen it. You've talked about it happening to Rooster Teeth. All these places that were like these places that were just unbound creativity. Once it goes corporatized, it's just going to be asphyxiated until it dies.
Well said. That was awesome.
Wow. Okay, well, I don't know if I can top that. So I think this is a good place to wrap this episode up. I really appreciate everybody coming on, having this talk. I think that, like I said, there are countless hours that could be spent discussing, what's going wrong with comics. I think there are just as many hours that should be spent talking about what is going right and how people can still make a viable living in the comic book industry. As we've talked about, there are people doing it. It's just the old way of doing it doesn't work. It doesn't work anymore. You're not just gonna schlep your portfolio to Marvel or DC and hot damn, we're going to give you 6 figures to start drawing whatever your favorite character was when you were a kid, and we're going to give you your health insurance and your retirement. You're going to retire from this place with a Spider-Man watch, and those days are over. So you're gonna have to be.
Wait a minute, they had Spider-Man watches?
Yeah, you didn't get yours.
I didn't get mine.
Oh man. So maybe we'll do another comic book roundtable one of these days if you guys will come back.
I'm in.
Yeah, anytime.
All right.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Well, thank you very much again, Art Thibert. Where can people find you online?
Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. I have a YouTube channel, and I have a weekly show called Pontificators every Wednesday night, 8:00 Eastern Standard Time. I also have a show called The Bros, which I do with Graham Nolan, Dan Frega, Billy Tucci, Andy Smith, who I know I'm probably missing somebody. Graham Nolan. Did I say Graham Nolan? Aaron Lepresti. And so there's 6 of us. And we each all have YouTube channels, and we just kind of rotate. So that's every Tuesday at 7 Eastern Standard Time. So If you're not subscribed to those guys, go subscribe. And it's a rotating show called The Professionals, and we just talk, comic book stories for about 2 hours. So, and then I have Black and White, Man vs. Machine Volume 2, which I'm finishing up now, but you can still get it in demand on Indiegogo. So type in Black and White, Man vs. Machine. Thanks so much for having me, Neon. I appreciate it.
Oh, absolutely. It's a pleasure. Matt, where can we find you at online?
You can find me on Twitter, Lil Formers, LILFORMERS, and Udon. Just look up udonentertainment.com or just search for Udon Entertainment on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. We're everywhere. And if you don't know who we are, if you like, we just read properties off the wall. If you like Street Fighter, Dark Souls, Mega Man, Macross, Evangelion. Well, we've got our book of the year coming up is Elden Ring official art books, 2 volumes coming in September. It's going to be
have it on pre-order, I think. We have it on pre-order.
It's what did we measure it at? 12 pounds or something like that. The 2 books.
Yeah, those Udon art books are fantastic, man. They look so damn good. Yeah,
They look great
we
on
try
your
even
coffee
something
table.
like something with this, which is a localized book from Japan. We gave it, we upgraded it to a hardcover from Japan. It's got a foil cover. If you buy it on the Udon store, you get foil prints, foil box for it, all kinds of stuff. So yeah, like nice looking stuff. Check out Udon.
Okay, thank you very much again for coming on. Aaron Sparrow, where can we find you online?
You can just find me like right there at Aaron_Sparrow on Twitter if you want to talk to me or yell at me or tell me I ruined your childhood. I'm also on Instagram. Mostly I just post custom toys and things like that, stuff I'm working on over there. But pretty accessible. And then you can also find me on the Thinking Critical YouTube channel. Go on there with Wes quite a bit. You can find me on Popped by Culture with Josh McDonald. I'm the co-host of the Tuesday Night Show with him. And I am part of the Sunday Night Smackdown with Max Von Priestley, MVP, on YouTube. And every now and then, Neon invites me on, and we have a great time.
Once every 3 years, I think.
Yeah.
That's what we're up to. We'll try to do it a little more often. For sure. Well, thank you, gentlemen, very much. Again, subscribe to this channel. Subscribe to the D-Res podcast, wherever you may find it. I don't know where you're finding it, where you're listening to it, but please subscribe and have a good one.